the queen of a lost human colony returned, with a Death Armada HFY Sci-Fi revenge story. The desert winds of Kael'thar never slept. Even at night, when the twin moons hung over the horizon like pale eyes, the wind screamed across the dunes, carrying with it dust and the whispers of old wars. Terran Vey crouched beside the broken hull of a trade skimmer, his hands deep in the guts of a fuel pump. He was a mechanic by trade, but really he was a survivor. Humans didn't belong on Kael'thar. The atmosphere was thin, the heat blistering, and the native Kaorians looked at him with the same expression one gives a stray animal, tolerated but never trusted. Yet Terran had learned how to make himself useful. He could fix what others thought broken. He could repair collapsed oxygen filters, patch shattered transport shells, even rewire alien plasma conduits. His hands were scarred, his face burned by years of sun and sand, but still he endured. The colony had been gone for centuries, but scraps of it remained, humans scattered across alien worlds like seeds blown too far. Terran was one of those remnants. And tonight, the stars stirred with something ancient. He noticed it first as a shadow across the moons. Not the ordinary shadow of drifting ships. The Kaorians had plenty of trade with other races. This was different. Silent. A wedge of darkness cutting through the silver light, and behind it, a growing hum that made the sand tremble under his knees. The hum became a roar. The roar became a scream. And then the sky split open. Dozens of ships fell out of slipspace. Their hulls were black as obsidian, their shapes cruel, blades of metal forged to strike fear. Engines glowed like dying stars. Kael'thar had no defense fleet worth speaking of. It had trade, it had markets, it had old monuments carved into desert rock, but no warships. The people had long believed themselves beneath notice. But Terran's blood ran cold as he stared upward, wiping grease across his brow. Because the ships that had arrived weren't alien. They were human. The city of Arrakeen erupted into panic. Kaorians poured into the streets, their long, sinewy frames draped in desert cloth, their mandible-like jaws clicking in fear. Merchants slammed down their stalls. Mothers dragged children into carved stone houses. The air filled with shrieks in two languages, Kaorian and the guttural, half-forgotten tongue of old Earth. From the ships, a message boomed. Not through comms, not through translators, through sound. A human voice amplified 1,000-fold. This is Queen Selene of the lost colony of Duranthes. We have returned. Kneel and you will live. Resist and you will burn. Terran's wrench clattered against the skimmer hull. Selene, the name struck him like a hammer. He knew the stories, every scattered human did. Stories whispered in mining camps, in slave pens, in the taverns of forgotten ports. About a colony ship that vanished centuries ago. About a leader, young, fierce, brilliant, who swore she would return one day to reclaim humanity's lost honor. Most thought it was a myth, a fairy tale for orphans. But now the myth stood in orbit, with a fleet built for war. The first ship descended through the clouds, a behemoth bristling with cannons. Its shadow swallowed half the marketplace. The desert winds howled against its armored hull. And from its underbelly, a single smaller craft broke away, gliding down with the elegance of a blade. It landed at the city's central square. The crowd gathered in terror, hemmed in by fear, eyes locked on the ramp as it hissed open. Terran pushed through the people, he didn't know why, curiosity, madness, a pull in his blood. But he shoved past Kaorians, ignoring their curses, until he stood near the front. The figure who emerged from the craft was human. Tall, armored in black and silver plates that shimmered under the moonlight. Her hair was white as starlight, though her face was young, unlined by age. Her eyes burned with the strange fire of someone who had seen too much. She removed her helmet. The desert air caught in her hair, and for a moment the square fell silent. Selene, Terran whispered before he could stop himself. Her gaze swept across the Kaorians and landed on him. Human recognizing human in a sea of alien faces. And she smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. The Kaorian governor slithered forward, robes dragging against stone. Queen, he rasped in accented standard. You dishonor our city with threats. Kael'thar is neutral. We owe no allegiance to your kind. Selene's expression didn't change. Neutrality is weakness. You harbor humans. You profit from them, bleed them for labor, trade their skills while you scorn their blood. The governor bristled. They are tolerated, that is enough. Seleni's smile hardened. Not anymore. She raised her gauntleted hand. Behind her, the great ship above shifted. A beam of searing white light dropped from the sky. The governor's palace exploded into fire. The ground shook, people screamed, and the desert wind carried smoke into the heavens. Selene lowered her hand. Her eyes never left Terran. Terran stumbled backward as the crowd broke into chaos. Kaelians scattered in terror. Some fled, some dropped to their knees, others screamed curses at the invaders. But Selene only walked forward, armor gleaming, as if the fire behind her was nothing but ceremony. When she reached Terran, she stopped. Her voice was soft now, intimate. You're human. He swallowed, I am. Name? Terran Vey. Selene tilted her head. A mechanic, a survivor, I see it in your hands. Her eyes softened for a moment. You've lived among them, served them, suffered them. Terran didn't answer, because every word was true. Selene leaned closer, so close he felt the heat of her breath. Do you kneel, Terran Vey, or do you stand with me? The crowd around them was frozen, waiting. The Kaelians' fear thickened the air. Every eye was on him. And in that moment he realized this wasn't just a question, it was a test. For him, for the colony, for what remained of humanity. Terran's throat went dry, his heart hammered like a war drum. He looked into her eyes and saw not just fire, he saw pain. Old, deep pain. But he also saw something else, something dangerous. Above, the rest of the fleet began to move. Ships spread across the sky like vultures, locking into formation. Their engines hummed with lethal intent. And then, as if the universe wanted to shatter the fragile silence, the Kael'thar alarm towers began to blare. Ancient sirens, warning beacons. The governor's surviving guards poured into the square, weapons raised. Plasma rifles, crude but deadly. One of them shouted in Kaelian, fire. Bolts of blue light streaked through the night. Selene didn't flinch. Her hand snapped up, and a wall of shimmering energy bloomed in front of her. The bolts dissolved against it like rain on glass. Her soldiers poured from the craft behind her, humans in dark armor, their faces hidden behind masks. They moved with perfect discipline, weapons humming with a deadly song. The square became a battlefield. Terran ducked as plasma fire seared overhead. Kaelians screamed, bodies falling. The human soldiers advanced, precise, unstoppable. And Selene stood in the center, untouchable, her eyes never leaving him. The smell of ozone and blood filled the square. Dust mixed with smoke. The governor was gone, the palace in ruins, the people broken. And Terran realized. This wasn't an invasion. It was a return. Selene wasn't here to conquer, she was here to claim. Claim humanity, claim vengeance, claim the galaxy that had forgotten her. And somehow, for reasons he didn't yet understand, she had chosen him to witness it. As the last Kaelian guard fell, Selene stepped closer, her voice low enough only he could hear. Come with me, Terran Vey. You've lived too long as their pet. It's time you remembered what it means to be human. Her soldiers gathered behind her, their armor dripping with smoke and victory. The fleet loomed above, casting shadows across the desert. Terran's breath caught, his heart pounded. Every instinct screamed at him to run. But every drop of blood in his veins whispered something else. That this was history, and history had chosen him. Part 2, The Crown of Duranthes. The Queen's hand hovered in front of Terran, steel and skin and heat. The desert around them shook again. Far out beyond the city, the horizon pulsed with white flashes. The Death Fleet was not idling. It was drawing a line in fire. Terran took her hand. Her fingers closed, strong as a clamp. She pulled him up the ramp and into the small craft. The hatch hissed. The roar of the outside world fell to a dull hum. Inside, the air smelled different, cool, filtered, with a faint scent like metal after rain. Selene didn't speak as the craft lifted. She stood by the forward screen, watching the city shrink beneath them. The market square, the broken palace, the tight, scared streets. Dunes beyond, etched by wind like ripples on a vast sea. Terran braced a hand on the bulkhead as they rose. The view swung. The sky opened. The flagship filled it. It was a cathedral of black and silver, ribbed and layered like a blade wrapped in armor. Lines of running lights winked along its flanks. Its name glowed in grim letters on the keel. Crown of D'Orienthis. The shuttle slid into a bay the size of Kael'thar's stadium. Rows of strikecraft slept in cradles. Crew in dark suits moved with practiced speed. Human faces, nearly all, scarred, determined, some too young for those eyes. The ramp dropped. Selene stepped out. The noise struck Terran at once, loaders whining, clamps thudding, instructions snapped through throat mics. A smell of oil, coolant, ozone. A woman in gray armor with a braid like a whip strode up. Her face was serious, but there was a spark in her eyes that felt like challenge. Admiral Rourke, Selene said. Status. Inner orbit secure, Admiral Rourke replied. Outer pickets show 3 civilian lanes fleeing at scatter speed. No organized defense, just local militia firing from the ground. Their shots can't reach us. Casualties minimal. We disabled the relay towers as ordered. Rourke's gaze slid to Terran. She took him in with a single, dispassionate glance. This the mechanic. Selene nodded. Terran Vey, I want him in engineering. Give him a clearance band and a work patch. Rourke handed Terran a black band. It wrapped around his left wrist and tightened with a soft click. A tiny light blinked once, then steadied. Follow the blue strips to Deck 9, Bay 3, Rourke said. Chief Harker will keep you alive if he likes you. She was already turning away when Selene added, Rourke, prepare the drop core. I will fetch it myself. Rourke paused. You're sure? We haven't confirmed the vault's depth. Selene's voice cooled. We will. Rourke nodded and moved off, firing instructions at the nearest tech. Selene turned back to Terran. For an instant, the iron edge in her expression softened again. You're here because you know this world, its streets, its hiding places, she said. And because I want you to see who we are, I will not lie to you, Terran. We came for something buried under this desert. When we have it, we will leave. What is it? He asked. Selene's eyes went distant, as if seeing something far beyond the hangar ceiling. A ledger, the ledger of chains, the names of those taken, the routes, the buyers, the payments, proof that the hegemony built its wealth with human bones. Her jaw flexed. For the first time, grief cracked the steel in her voice. We were not lost, she said softly. We were stolen and sold. The words hit Terran like a blow he had prepared for all his life without knowing. Images came. His mother's hands stained with dye, his father's soft laugh that faded when Terran was 10. The night strangers took his sister, Jun, and the long years of no answer. A ledger, names, roots. Proof. Where? His voice was rough. Beneath the salt flats of Keshvar, Selene said. Under the old Kaelian archive, they built their history over our chains. The hangar hummed. Far off, a siren rose and fell. Somewhere below, the ship's spine thrummed like a sleeping beast, feeling the hunger of gravity and battle. Selene touched the band at Terran's wrist. You have 3 hours. Evacuate anyone near the flats. Then clear the zone. When the drill fires, nothing on the surface will walk away. Terran stared at her. 3 hours, that's nothing. The hegemony will respond when they feel the knife, she said. They always do. I won't give them time to lay traps. Save who you can. Trust your feet. She lifted her helmet, sealed it, and for a beat her voice came through the speaker like an echo from a chapel. Remember this, Terran. Mercy is a blade you choose to carry, but never let it be taken from your hand. She was gone, striding for the inner lifts, flanked by 2 guards in storm gray. A deckhand waited for him at the bay's edge, thin and wiry, with hands that never stopped moving. You heard the Queen, the deckhand said. I'm Leela. Come on, I'll get you to Harker before the old man decides you're late on principle. They jogged into the ship's guts, following glowing strips that pulsed along the deck. Blue led down, red led up. White strips ran to med, green to munitions. The crown was a map that taught itself to your eyes if you let it. First time, Leela asked without looking at him. First time in anything like this, Terran said. You'll be fine, Leela's mouth tilted. Unless Harker hates you, he hates most things. The corridor widened into a cavern of machines. Reactors sang a deep, steady tone that thudded against Terran's ribs. A central column rose like a black tree, sprouting conduits thick as a man's waist. Engineers in harnesses crawled over it like ants on a hive. Chief, Leela shouted, you're stray human. A bear of a man turned from a console. He had white hair, copper skin, and a nose broken more than once. Grease streaked his cheek. His eyes were ice. "Harker," he grunted. "You the Kael'thar wrench." "Taran Vey," Taran said, meeting his gaze. Harker's stare flicked over his hands, the way he stood, the oil under his nails. He jerked his chin. "You know vacuum seals on rotational couplers?" "Yes." "Good, the starboard grasper's throwing a tantrum. It'll tear its own wrist if we fire the dorsal batteries. Go fix it." He shoved a tool satchel into Taran's chest. "Break anything and I'll space you, or worse, make you sign a requisition." Leela winked and peeled off. Taran slung the satchel and threw himself into motion. He worked. The ship's machines talked to him the way broken things always did. The grasper's coupler was hot and screaming for relief. The seal had cooked. He stripped it, cleaned the housing, found a hairline crack in the bracket. He improvised a brace from a spare retainer and a slice of impact gel. He bled pressure, reseated the ring, flushed the lines, checked the sensors. The grasper's readout smoothed from red to green like a fever breaking. When he looked up, Harker was a step away, watching. "Not the ugliest fix I've seen," the chief said. A pause, then almost grudging. "Good hands." Taran wiped sweat. "I need a shuttle." Harker's eyebrow lifted. "Do you?" "Queen's orders," Taran said. 3 hours to clear the salt flats." Harker's eyes flicked to the chronometer inset in the bulkhead. It read *02, 4712 and counted down. "You and every saint," he muttered. "Rourke's already deploying drop teams to secure the perimeter. Civilians run slow. You'll need a voice that speaks Kael." "I have one," Taran said. Harker snorted. "You better, Leela, get this poor fool a hull and a pilot who owes me money." "Half the deck owes you money," Leela called from under a panel. "Which one do you want to lose on purpose?" "Cho," Harker said. "He flies like he's flirting with gravity." "I flirt back," a young man said, appearing at Taran's shoulder as if conjured. He was slighter than Taran, with a pilot's calm eyes and a grin that said he liked being alive too much to bet on it. "You Taran? Come on. I warmed her up before I knew you existed." They ran. As they crossed the last hatch, the ship's lights flickered once, deep and slow, like a giant drawing breath. A voice rolled through the crown, cool and composed. "All hands, this is Admiral Rourke. Outer screens report a disturbance at the Keshvar vector. Unknown mass shift. Repeat, unknown mass shift. Maintain readiness condition 2. Engineering, stabilize spin. Gunnery, hold cold." Cho looked at the chronometer. 02:39:48. "They're early," he said. "They always are," Taran said, and hoped he sounded like he knew. Cho's shuttle bit the air like it wanted to eat it. They dropped through the thin cloud layer and skimmed above dunes that flashed gold in the twin moon's light. The salt flats spread ahead, a stainless plain framed by black rock. Old wind towers punctured the sky. The ruined Kael'rian archive squatted at the center, a broken pyramid half buried by time. Taran's stomach tightened. He knew the place. As a boy, he had scavenged around its edges for scrap to sell. He had never gone inside. The elders said the archive was cursed by the first Sand Kings. A lie to keep kids away from the wrong history, he thought now. The flats were not empty. People streamed across them, Kael'rians in long wraps, dragging carts, carrying children, clutching bundles that held all they owned. A few humans moved among them, faces turned up in fear at the black giants in the sky. Kael militia in dull armor waved rifles, shouting. Their command flags snapped like angry tongues. A battery of antique launchers jutted from the ridge. Useless against the crown, deadly enough to tear a shuttle from the air. "Guns there," Cho said. "Take us down behind the west rise," Taran said. "We'll duck the angles." Cho did, threading their shuttle through a crease in the dunes with a lover's touch. They kissed sand, skidded, and settled in a plume. The ramp clanged, heat and salt hit Taran's face. He ran into it. A Kael'rian towering over him stepped into his way, mandibles bared. "Human, you bring war, we will." "Sierra," Taran shouted over him, past him. The Kael'rian jerked, her eyes widened. "Taran." Sierra had been his only friend here. She traded water permits, scavenged parts, stories. She had taught him the Kael tongue when he was little more than a shadow in her doorway. She had laughed at his jokes when no one else did. Now she stood with dust crusted on her wraps, a baby sling tight to her chest, a second child clutching her leg. Her eyes were new, red-rimmed, swollen, The laugh was gone. "You came," she said. The words were relief and accusation at once. "The Queen gave me 3 hours," Terran said. "We have to clear this place. There's a vault below the archive. She will crack it. The ground will break." Sierra's hand tightened on the sling. "My son," she whispered. "They took him, raiders from the flats. They ran into the old tunnel mouths, if the ground." Terran's gaze snapped to the archive, to the hummock of rubble, to the old storm vents he had once crawled into and crawled back out of when the dust coughed in his lungs. "Show me the way," he said. "Cho, mark the families, get them to the west. Anyone hurt, send coordinates, don't be a hero." Cho's grin flashed and was gone. "I only pretend well," he said, and was already dragging a stretcher out to a collapsed Kale whose leg bent wrong. Sierra ran. Terran ran with her. The militia shouted at them and then recognized Sierra and moved to help. The air shook beneath a sound like a throat clearing itself, the death fleet shifting into a new position overhead. 021103. They plunged into a fissure behind the archive, half hidden by torn cloth and piled stones. It breathed cold air that tasted like old salt and iron. Their lanterns threw narrow cones. Their footsteps boomed hollow. "I lost him here," Sierra said, voice flat to keep from breaking. "We were taking water from a seep after the alarms. He slipped from my hand. I heard him cry. I heard men." "How long?" Terran asked. "In hours." If the raiders were local, they would know the safe paths. They would take the child to sell in the confusion. Humans fetched high prices in certain ports. Kale children did too if they had bright eyes and good teeth. Terran forced his fury into movement. They followed the tunnel as it sloped down, curving. The walls were smooth in places, carved in others. The Kale had left marks here long ago, spirals, hands, the tail ends of songs etched into salt. Sierra touched one with her fingertips as they passed. A goodbye, a promise. They reached a cross shaft and heard it, far away, a thin wail. Sierra's breath hitched. She darted left. Terran grabbed her arm and dragged her right. She hissed at him, fury flaring. "They will expect you to run toward the sound," he said. "Raiders echo their lure. The air changes first." She stared, then nodded once, jaw tight, and followed. The right-hand path smelled of machines. The air temperature dropped. The salt floor changed to old metal, covered in silt. They reached a circular door rimmed with corroded glyphs that were not Kale. Terran's lantern caught words in old standard beneath the glyphs. DARANTHIS Consortium, Archive Node K7. His heart thumped once very hard. "Is this?" Sierra whispered. "It's ours," Terran said. He crouched at the side panel. The seals were long dead, but the door wasn't locked. It was asleep. He pulled his tool from the satchel. He bridged old contacts with his last spare wire and a prayer. A pop, a sizzle, the scent of burned age. The light over the panel flickered from dead to a shy yellow. "Come on," he murmured. "Wake up." Behind them, far, far above, something vast groaned. A tremor slid down the stone like a shiver. 014326. Sierra flinched. "Your queen." "She's positioning the drill," Terran said. "We still have time." The panel blinked green. The door rolled open with a sound like a sigh trapped for centuries. Cold air poured out, so cold it made Terran's teeth ache. Beyond was a stair and a chamber and a black shape rising from its center. A pillar of fused glass with veins of metal and the faintest glow at its heart. The glow ticked once like a pulse when Terran stepped over the threshold. Sierra pressed back to the wall, clutching the sling. The baby inside it stirred and whimpered. "Terran," she whispered, "we should not be here." He wanted to agree. He wanted to flee. He walked forward. The pillar's face was smooth as water. As he neared, letters surfaced on it like bubbles. Standard, Kale, 2 other scripts he didn't know. The letters rearranged until they spelled words his eyes could drink. His hand moved of its own will. He pressed his palm against the surface. Heat rippled through his skin. A tiny sting pricked his fingertip. The pillar drank a drop of his blood and sighed. Homo sapiens lineage match, DARANTHIS outcast thread. Welcome, child. Sierra gasped despite herself. "Terran," she said, "it speaks." The pillar's glow grew, small and steady. Words bloomed and chased one another across it, faster than his eyes could swallow. Status locked, item ledger of chains. Access protocol, dual key. Key 1, bloodline of the crown. Key 2, bloodline of the broken. His mouth went dry. Bloodline of the crown, he said. Selene. A tremor ran through the floor again, deeper. Dust sifted from the ceiling. Tiny crystals ticked on the metal steps like rain. 0121, 07. Terran pulled his hand back. He looked at Sierra. We have to get Selene here. If this is real, if this holds the names, it will be in there. My sister, your son, all of them. Sierra's eyes shone. If it is true, she whispered, as if afraid to wound the words by saying them too hard. He thumbed the comm on his wristband. This is Terran Vey to Crown of Duranthes. I found something. I think I found it. A node marked Duranthes Consortium. A pillar that. Static, then Rourke's voice tight. We have you Vey coordinates. Terran rattled them off. Rourke repeated them back exactly, no nonsense. Queen is already en route, Rourke said. Outer screens show a slip anomaly spiking hard above your sector. The hegemony is coming fast. You have 60 minutes. 59, move people clear. Understood, Terran said. Vey, Rourke added softer. Good work. The comm clicked dead. Sierra let out a long breath she'd been holding for years. They turned to go and froze. A shape stood in the doorway they had used. Tall, lean, wrapped in desert cloth with a helm that hid the face. Two others behind him. Quiet men, quiet weapons. Raiders. The lead raider tilted his head when he saw the pillar. His voice came smooth and pleasant from behind the helm grill. Well, he said, we have a lucky day. Sierra stepped in front of her children. The baby in the sling whimpered. The older child, Hyven, bit his lip hard enough to draw blood and did not cry. Terran raised his hands, slow. We don't want trouble. No, the raider's voice warmed, amused. We do. This chamber will buy a ship and a city, or a city and a ship. Depends on who we sell to. Step away. Terran's brain ran through angles. 3 raiders, the leader inside the door, the 2 others back in the hall. Sierra at his right, children behind her. The pillar at his left, cool and impossible. He didn't have a gun. He had a tool satchel and hands. He took a step the wrong way on purpose. The raider aimed his weapon lazily to adjust. Terran kept talking calm. You don't want to be here when the ground cracks, he said. The Queen will drill this place. It will fall like a sinkhole. Your legs will snap in the dark. No trader pays for broken goods. That pulled a small huff of laughter from the man. You bargain well for something you cannot defend. I'm bargaining because I know you, Terran said. You're from the West Dunes. Your helm grill is patched with copper wire from the Var scrapyard. Your rifle magnet sticks on the left. Your shot will pull low. You're not bored enough to die for pride. The raider's helm tilted a fraction. Name. Terran Vey. A pause. Your mother fixed our water stones once, the raider said. She did not charge me. She said I looked like a man who had made enough bad trades. Terran's throat closed. He held his voice steady through a narrow gate. If you know that, then you know I am not lying. Let us pass. I will forget your faces. You will forget mine. The raider stood very still for 3 breaths. Then he stepped aside. He raised a hand to hold his men from arguing. Dead is a knot, he said. Sometimes you cut it, sometimes you pull it through. Sierra half collapsed with relief. She bowed in the Kale way, hand to chest, head low. May your children drink, she said. They drink when the wind allows, the raider said, and his voice had no triumph in it now, only a man's weight. Terran led them past with his blood loud in his ears, every step a bet he could not pay twice. He did not look back. They reached daylight again to find the flats boiling. Evacuation lines stretched like threads pulled tight enough to sing. Kaorians marched in bands, guided by militia who had shed their arrogance with their certainty. Humans moved among them, making paths, lifting burdens. Cho ran like a man with 3 hearts, driving his anti-grav sled from one knot of trouble to another. He saw Terran and flashed a brief, beaming grin that looked like a boy's, then was gone. Thunder rolled overhead, not from the sky but from the crown's belly. A new shape came down through the clouds, narrower and crueler than the shuttle. It burned a clean line through air and dust. It landed on the ridge above the archive, like a dagger laid across a throat. Selene stepped out with 2 guards and Admiral Rourke. Her gaze found Terran at once. He pointed at the fissure. There's a Duranthes node, he said as she reached him, not wasting breath on anything else. A pillar, it wants 2 keys, it wants you. Seleni's eyes flared, and whatever she held back broke. "Show me," she said. They descended. Dust drifted on the tunnel's breath. The pillar pulsed low and steady, as if it had heard her coming the way a dog hears its master. Selene removed her glove before Terran could tell her not to. She laid her palm on the black glass. The glow surged from its heart to its skin, sudden and bright, painting their faces in cold light. Sierra made a small sound and covered her children's eyes. Rourke's hand tightened on her weapon, then relaxed. Letters danced. Selene did not smile. The light carved hollows in her face that looked like old wounds. "Key 2, she said to the pillar. "Bloodline of the broken." Terran reached again without thinking. Selene caught his wrist with surprising gentleness. "Not you," she said, voice raw around the edges. "It will take anyone stolen, not only from Duranthes, anyone human, whose line was cut and sold." Sierra looked from Selene to Terran. She swallowed. Her voice was small. "My son is Kale," she whispered, "but his father was human." The tunnel seemed to hold its breath. Even the dust fell slower. Selene turned to Sierra. The queen of a death fleet, who had burned a palace like paper an hour ago, knelt before a mother in a hole in the earth. "Will you help us open it?" Selene asked, and her voice was not command now but plea. "For your son, for all our dead." Sierra's hands trembled as she freed the sling. The baby blinked up at the cold light and made a small, uncertain sound, somewhere between a laugh and a sob. Sierra pressed the tiny palm to the pillar. For a heartbeat, nothing. Then the glow raced like a river. "Key 2, bloodline of the broken, accepted." The pillar sang, a chord so pure it made Terran's eyes sting. Metal groaned. Locks that had not turned for centuries remembered how to move. The chamber shook as if a giant had placed a gentle hand on it and pushed. A seam opened in the floor. Dust flowered up. Cold air poured out, harsher odors sharp as knives. They stared into the dark crack as it widened. Selene's face was washed in light and shadow. For an instant, Terran saw the girl she once had been, standing in a different dark, making a promise to ghosts. Rourke's comm clicked. Queen outer screens report hegemony signatures exiting slipspace over Keshvar. Numbers unknown. They brought a cathedral class. We count at least one Leviathan. "Hold them," Selene said without looking away. "Buy me 10 minutes or buy me none. I am not leaving this hole." The seam finished its slow arc. A platform rose like a tongue. On it stood not a book of pages, not a chest of gems. Rows of tall, narrow shapes gleamed under frost. Stasis pods. The front pod's frost was thin. Through it a small face slept. Human, a child, no more than 6, curled like a seed. A pulse blipped across the pod's rim. Sierra made a sound that wasn't a word, wasn't any sound Terran had ever heard from a living throat. She reached with shaking fingers and touched the pod's surface where a child's hand lay under the ice, inches from hers. The pulse on the rim answered with a tiny jump, a living heartbeat, older than her grief. Selene's breath left her as if something had punched her in the chest. Her gauntlet scraped the platform as she reached, gathering herself back into a queen and failing for a long, raw second. "Not a ledger," Terran whispered, throat tight. "A vault." Selene's eyes filled with a light that had nothing to do with the pillar. "A witness," she said, voice breaking, "and an indictment." Above them, the tunnel shook as the first distant cannonades began, like thunder rolling closer and closer. The hegemony tearing reality open to reach for what they had left here. The ground quaked with the weight of distant war. Dust trickled from the tunnel roof in thin streams. The glow from the pillar guttered, as if afraid of the thunder rolling from above. Selene stood frozen before the row of pods, her gauntlet pressed against the frost, eyes locked on the sleeping child within. The weight of centuries bent her shoulders, but her voice, when it came, was steel. "Rourke," she snapped into her calm. "Status." The Admiral's reply cracked with static. "Hegemony fleet has arrived. Confirm 1 Cathedral-class command carrier. Confirm Leviathan dreadnought. 6 escorts. They are taking orbital dominance. Crown has engaged outer screens, holding but barely." Selene's jaw clenched. "Deploy the spears. Keep the Leviathan from charging its spinal gun. I will join you." "Yes, Queen, but be warned. The Leviathan's gravity well is active. Any retreat vector will collapse in minutes." The comm cut. Terran stared at her, throat dry. You can't fight a Leviathan, he said. No ship can. Seleni's gaze shifted to him, hard and bright. No ship, she agreed, but a fleet and a queen who does not forget. The pods hissed softly, ancient machinery awakening. More rows revealed themselves as the platform expanded outward. Dozens, hundreds, each with a small body curled within. Sierra pressed trembling hands against one. A girl, not her son, but human. Fragile, real, tears slid down her cheeks, leaving dark lines in the salt dust. These are children, she whispered. Selene nodded. Taken, stolen, sold, frozen until the hegemony decided what to do with them. They hid the crime here. The ledger was never words, it was breath. Her voice trembled for the first time. They thought we would be forgotten. They thought time would erase our dead. She turned to Terran. Now you see why we came back, why we built the Death Fleet, not for conquest, not for glory, for this. A distant boom shook the tunnel, louder now. Terran could almost picture it. The Crown's batteries hammering against the Leviathan's shields, arcs of fire crossing black space. The Death Fleet bleeding itself against a monster built to erase worlds. He looked at Selene, at her soldiers standing guard in the flickering light, at Sierra clutching her children. And he realized something terrifying. Selene wasn't bluffing. She would fight to the last ship. She would burn the desert to ash. And if she fell here, so would every last remnant of humanity's hope. The pillar pulsed again. New words shimmered on its black face. Archive access unlocked. Do you wish to awaken? The chamber grew colder. The hum of ancient engines stirred beneath their feet. Selene's eyes locked on the glowing words. For a long breath, she didn't move. Then, slow as a knife drawn from a sheath, she reached out. Enric's voice cut in, sharp and raw. Queen, Leviathan charging its main gun. We cannot hold its beam. You must choose now. The chamber shook as if the planet itself had heard the threat. A hairline crack raced along the wall. Selene pulled her hand back, trembling. For the first time, Terran saw doubt in her eyes. If she awakened the pods now, she might save the children, but trap them all under a bombardment that could erase the archive in seconds. If she sealed it, the proof might be lost forever, but the fleet might survive to fight another day. The queen of a lost colony stood between hope and annihilation, and she looked, for just an instant, very human. Terran stepped forward before fear could stop him. Don't close it, he said. Not now. If you bury this again, it stays forgotten. Forever, you didn't come back to keep hiding. Selene's stare cut through him. If I open them now, they die before they wake. Do you understand what a Leviathan beam does to a planet? I've seen enough burned cities, Terran said, voice shaking. If you leave them sleeping, the hegemony wins without firing. At least give them a chance. The air between them felt sharp enough to bleed. Sierra spoke, voice ragged. Queen, my son is gone, I know that. But if these children live, then someone else's son will be returned. Do not let them stay in the dark. Her words broke something. Selene's breath hitched. Her eyes closed for one beat. Then she turned to the pillar, raised her palm, and spoke with a voice that shook the chamber. Awakened. The pillar flared. The pods groaned. Frost cracked and fell in glittering sheets. Heart monitors flickered to green. The chamber filled with the first soft cries of children who had been silent for centuries. Above them, thunder roared again. The crown of Duranthus fired every gun it had. Selene's death fleet screamed into the jaws of a Leviathan. And in the dark of Kael'thar, the stolen children of humanity drew their first living breaths. The alarm blared inside Terran's wristband. 3 sharp pulses repeated. Ground incursion. The echo of war above became more than distant thunder. Now the desert itself shook with the landing of enemy dropships. The salt flats glowed with streaks of fire as heavy hulls punched through the atmosphere. Selene snapped her head up. Rurk, confirm. The Admiral's reply was strained. Confirmed, hegemony shock troops inbound. Thousands. Their target is your sector. We're holding the Leviathan's beam but bleeding hard. Queen, you have minutes at most before the enemy reaches the vault. Selene's voice was quiet, dangerous. Then we will make minutes count. The pods around them hissed, releasing streams of vapor. Children stirred inside, eyes fluttering, limbs twitching. The air filled with thin, bewildered cries. Sierra fell to her knees, clutching the edge of one pod. They're alive. They're really alive. Selene placed a hand on her shoulder, steady. Get them out, keep them breathing. The Death Fleet fights for them now. Then she turned to Terran. You wanted to remember what it means to be human, Terran Vey. Here is your chance. Stand with me, or step aside. Terran's hands trembled, but he reached for the tool satchel slung across his chest. I'll stand. The first shock troops hit the flats. Through the fissure above, Terran saw them, ranks of armored figures spilling from black transports. The Hegemony's soldiers were tall, insectal brutes, 4 arms, plated hides, eyes glowing like molten iron. They carried plasma lances and shields that shimmered like liquid glass. The Kale militia opened fire from the ridge. Old rifles spat blue bolts. A few soldiers fell, but the rest advanced, relentless, their shields turning the barrage into sparks. One Kale screamed as a lance bolt burned through his chest. Another was hurled aside by an energy hammer. The militia line wavered. Cho's shuttle skimmed low, cannons flaring, buying seconds. But even he couldn't hold forever. They're heading straight for us, Terran said. Seleni's lips curved in a grim smile. Let them try. She raised her wrist. A command pulse flashed into the air. From the ridge, black-armored soldiers of the Death Fleet surged forward, humans bred for war, moving like one body. They struck the advancing Hegemony line with precision fire, blades snapping from their gauntlets, rifles chattering plasma bursts that carved the night. The flats became a storm of light and dust. Seleni's guards formed a circle around the fissure entrance, weapons locked. Terran grabbed a discarded Kale rifle from the ground and checked its charge. It was heavy, unwieldy, but it would kill. Sierra crouched by the pods, trying to calm the waking children. Their cries mingled with the noise of battle, thin threads of life in the roar of death. The first enemy dropped into the tunnel, a brute with 4 arms and a lance taller than Terran. Seleni's blade was in her hand before it landed, a thin line of light forged for killing. She moved like water cutting upward. The brute's torso split in a spray of molten ichor. Hold the line, she roared. Terran fired the rifle. The recoil nearly broke his shoulder, but the bolt tore through another brute's chest. The alien screamed, falling back into its kin. Adrenaline roared in his blood. He fired again and again. Each shot was a war drum in his bones. The tunnel filled with bodies, smoke, blood that hissed when it touched the salt. Selene fought like she had been born for it, every strike a lesson, every motion clean. Terran fought beside her, clumsy but stubborn, fixing jams with hands that knew machines better than weapons. Sierra fought too, wielding a scavenged knife with the ferocity of a mother cornered. Still, the enemy kept coming. Above, the Leviathan's roar split the night. The ground shuddered as its spinal cannon unleashed a beam. For a moment, the desert horizon turned white. Then the Crown answered, its guns burning the sky. The world was tearing itself apart, and they were trapped at its heart. A brute's hammer shattered the wall near Terran's head. He staggered, fell, dropped his rifle. The alien loomed over him, raising the weapon for the killing blow. A plasma bolt split its skull. The body collapsed. Cho stood in the fissure mouth, rifle smoking, grin wild. Figured you could use a hand. Terran scrambled up, panting. About time. Cho tossed him a fresh rifle. Don't die yet. You're the only one who can fix the shuttle when I break it. Selene cut down another brute, armor dripping with ichor. She glanced at the pods, at the children gasping for breath, their tiny hands pressed against glass. Rurk, she barked, we cannot hold this line much longer. The Admiral's voice thundered back. Queen, the Leviathan is charging again. If it fires, we all burn. Selene's eyes burned with fury. She raised her blade, pointing toward the sky. Then we cut the beast's throat. The salt flats had become hell. Every breath of air was smoke. Every step was blood. The cries of newly awakened children mingled with the roars of alien soldiers. Above, the sky boiled with fire as the Death Fleet tore itself against the Leviathan's shields. Selene stood in the fissure's mouth, her blade dripping molten ichor. Her armor was cracked, her hair damp with sweat, but her voice still carried like a trumpet of war. Terran, Cho, Sierra, hold this vault. No one crosses that threshold, do you understand? Terran's grip tightened on his rifle. You're leaving. The Leviathan charges again, Selene said. If it fires, there will be no vault to defend, no children to save. She touched the comm on her wrist. Rurk, prepare the spears, we strike now. Rourke's voice came back, grim but steady. All batteries ready, boarding craft primed. The Crown will lead the charge. Selene looked back at them one last time. Her eyes caught Terran's, and for a breath her steel cracked, showing the weight she carried. "Do not fail me," she said softly. Then she was gone, sprinting into the dust, her guards at her heels. The battle in the flats raged on. Hegemony soldiers pressed toward the fissure in endless waves. They had no fear, no mercy. For every brute that fell, two more forced their way through the smoke. Cho's shuttle roared overhead, cannons slashing through the line. "Keep them tight," he shouted over comms. "I'll shear the edges." Sierra dragged children from pods, wrapping them in cloth, cradling them in shaking arms. "Terran, they're waking too fast. I can't keep up." "Then we keep them alive long enough for Selene to finish," Terran said. He fired, the rifle burning hot against his hands. Another brute fell. But for everyone, another stepped over its corpse. Above, the Death Fleet moved. The crown of Duranthes surged forward, its prow glowing with stored power. Around it, smaller cruisers fanned out, spears of black iron against the Leviathan's vast, hulking bulk. The Leviathan was a monster, a cathedral of war, its flanks bristling with weapons, its hull plated in scales of starsteel. Its main cannon charged, a sun of burning light gathering at its core. Rourke's voice thundered across every channel. For the stolen, for the dead, for humanity, spear formation now. The Death Fleet dove as one, a storm of fire against a Titan. Back on the flats, the fissure mouth exploded as a lance bolt struck near. Salt and stone rained down. Terran was thrown to the ground, ears ringing. He rolled, coughing dust, and saw a brute charging through the gap. Its shield flared, its lance raised. Sierra screamed and hurled a knife. The blade sank into the brute's shoulder, just enough to stagger it. Terran fired once, twice, 3 times. The brute collapsed inches from the pods. His hands shook, but he forced himself back up. "We can't let them through." Cho's voice crackled in his ear. "Terran, look up." Terran lifted his head and saw the Leviathan fire. The cannon roared like a star being born. A beam of pure annihilation ripped across the void, tearing space itself. Anything it touched ceased to exist. But the Crown was waiting. The flagship dove straight into the beam, shields flaring, armor melting. For one terrible moment it seemed the ship would shatter. Then Rourke's voice boomed. "Release the spears." Dozens of boarding craft shot from the Crown's belly, screaming through fire, piercing the Leviathan's flanks like arrows. Explosions rippled along the monster's body. Its shields faltered, flickered. The Death Fleet swarmed. In the vault, the children cried louder. The pods shook with energy backlash. Sierra pressed her forehead against her babies, whispering prayers. Terran stood in front of them, rifle raised, his body screaming with exhaustion. More brutes poured in, too many. Cho landed his shuttle half across the fissure, cannons spitting fire point blank. He jumped out, rifle blazing. "If we're dying, at least we'll make it loud." Terran barked a laugh through his fear. "You're insane." "Best way to be alive," Cho grinned even as he fired. Above, Selene herself led a spear team. She landed on the Leviathan's hull, blade cutting through its black steel. Her soldiers followed, planting charges, carving paths into the beast's heart. "Crown to Queen," Rourke called. "We breach in 90 seconds. After that, either we gut the beast or it guts us." Selene's voice was fire. "Then we cut deep." Back on the flats, the fissure collapsed under a bombardment. Dust swallowed the vault. Terran shielded Sierra and the children with his body, the world shaking around them. When the dust cleared, he saw it. A new wave of brutes, larger than the rest, their armor glowing with hegemony symbols. Elite killers. They raised their weapons. And Terran realized they couldn't hold any longer. The vault trembled like the ribs of a dying beast. Dust rained from the ceiling, the pods rattled and children wailed. The brutes surged forward in formation, their elite armor glowing with cruel light. Terran's rifle sputtered dry. He hurled it like a club, striking one brute in the jaw before it split in two under Cho's cannon fire. But there were too many, always too many. Sierra crouched behind him, clutching her sling tight, whispering, "Please, not here, not now." The brutes advanced. Above in the void, Selene cut into the Leviathan's black steel hull. Her boarding team followed, shaped charges biting into seams, carving a glowing wound. The Leviathan groaned, its shields faltering. Fire spilled into space. "Inside," Selene shouted. Her soldiers leapt, boots clamping to the wound. They forced a hatch and stormed in. The Leviathan's corridors were vast and wet-looking, as though grown rather than built. Strange fluids oozed down walls of living metal. The air was thick with the musk of old predators. Hegemony guards rushed them. Selene's blade cut arcs of light, her soldiers firing with precision. Every step forward was bought in blood. "Core chamber ahead," Rook's voice thundered in her ear. "You have 5 minutes before our hull fails. Do it, Queen, do it now." Selene pressed forward, eyes blazing. "For the stolen, for the children." Back in the vault, Terran stumbled against a pod. His body screamed with exhaustion. The elite brutes raised their lances, the vault filled with the hiss of charging weapons. And then, the pillar pulsed. The black glass erupted with light, brighter than any torch. Words flared across it in every tongue at once. "Protocol Guardian Status, ACTIVATD." The air shook, the pods thrummed like drums. From the platform's edges, machines unfolded. Angular frames plated in frost. They rose like statues given breath, towering constructs, forged long ago by human hands and buried with the children. Their eyes blazed with white fire. The brutes froze, uncertain. Then the constructs moved. One slammed its fist into the ground, sending a shockwave that hurled brutes across the chamber. Another lifted a pod gently into its arms, shielding it with armor thick as starsteel. The Guardians roared without mouths, their voices the grind of old machines. Terran gaped, heart hammering. They left protectors. Sierra's eyes filled with tears. The stolen were never meant to be alone. The Guardians waded into the brutes, tearing them apart with unstoppable force. Metal screamed, ichor sprayed. For the first time, the vault was not a slaughterhouse, but a fortress. Above, Selene reached the Leviathan's core chamber. It was a cathedral of living metal, its heart a pulsing orb the size of a tower, wrapped in tendrils of energy. The cannon's charge built within it, light swelling like the sun behind glass. Her soldiers planted charges along the conduits. Plasma fire licked the air as defenders poured in. Selene wove through them, her blade an arc of fury. Every cut was vengeance, every strike a memory of the stolen. At the base of the core, she slammed her gauntlet down and pressed her palm against a panel. The Leviathan shuddered. Its systems recognized her humanity, an echo of the same lineage that had built the vault. "Access DNIED, foreign occupier." Selene's teeth bared, not for long. She rammed her blade into the panel, sparks erupted. The core screamed, the whole ship buckling under its pain. "Detonate," she shouted. On the flats, Rook gave the order. The Crown's surviving cruisers unleashed their final payloads. Boarding teams triggered their charges. The Leviathan convulsed in orbit. Explosions tore along its spine. Its cannon stuttered, light spilling wild and uncontrolled. From the desert, Terran saw the sky crack open in white fire. The Leviathan's roar became a shriek, and then silence. The beast was dying. But victory was never clean. The vault shook harder than before. Cracks spread across the ceiling. Pods rattled violently. Terran caught Sierra's arm. "We have to move." The Guardians formed a shield around the pods, carrying them toward the fissure. But the ground split under the strain, opening a chasm that swallowed half the chamber. One row of pods slid toward the abyss. Sierra screamed. "No!" She lunged, clutching at the nearest pod, her fingers scraping against the frost. Terran grabbed her, hauling her back from the edge. The pod tumbled into the dark. Children lost again. His heart shattered, but there was no time to mourn. "Out," he shouted. "We have to get them out before the whole vault collapses." Above, the Leviathan tore itself apart. Selene stood in the core chamber, fire rising around her, her soldiers dragging her toward the exit. Her comm crackled with Rook's voice. "Queen, the Leviathan is falling. We've broken its spine." Selene's eyes locked on the dying core. For a heartbeat, she hesitated, torn between vengeance and survival. Then she turned and ran. The Leviathan's death scream shook the stars.